I gotta admit, this Chuck Dixon guy was initially I was kind of annoyed by, but now I'm starting to like him. Like he's really just hitting nails on the head when it comes to the comic book industry's I don't know self destruction. Anyway, article by Batman in the Comics. Chuck Dixon. DC and Marvel seem to be in some sort of a suicide pact with themselves to destroy American comics. No shit. Famed Batman writer Chuck Dixon recently claimed that DC Comics and Marvel Comics are intentionally attempting to destroy American comics. Of course they are, because they're idiots. Like, they have lost their fucking mind. Dixon's comments came in his latest YouTube episode of Ask Chuck Dixon. Dixon was asked by a fan, What do you think do these big two need to do to save their decline of popularity? And lastly, what are your thoughts on Comicsgate? Do you think it's a useless movement that's overdoing it or a necessary thing to wake up Marvel DC? The current scribe on Arcade and Comics, Something Big, and Go Monster Go responded to the questions today. The questions are very much irrelated. So you've got DC and you've got Marvel. They're the big two. They're the big cats in the cage. They're the stars. They're the marquee, and they float all the boats. All the comic industry goes up or down with the fortunes of DC or Marvel. That's just the way it is. He continued. I don't see it ever changing, particularly since DC and Marvel seem to be in some sort of a suicide pact with themselves to destroy American comics. I'm beginning to believe that they are doing it intentionally, and I don't think in a year from now DC or Marvel are going to exist as we need them today, as we see them today, or as we remember them. The parent companies can't keep carrying these comic book companies that simply don't deliver any kind of earning. And I know in the new economy, as NPR always tells me, earnings don't matter, but they do. They do in the end. You gotta pay people. You gotta make enough money to pay everybody and keep the lights on, he asserted. Dixon then turned his attention to the first question, saying, what can they do to turn it around? Honestly, I think at this point it's too late. They've screwed the pooch on all this stuff so much. They've chased away so many rumors. At this point, if DC and Marvel said, well, we're going to go back to doing things the way we used to, at this point, would you believe them? Because they've certainly said it enough times, he declared. Dixon then proceeded to provide an example. As the stream ran out of the Ultimate Universe at Marvel, it seemed like every 3 months the company would say, we're going to return to more traditional ways of comics. We're going to do a soft reboot and basically go back to the way we were doing business before, but it turned out to never be true. Wow, gasp! I'm shocked, really. And that's half sarcasm, half true. Like I'm not as well versed in comic history, so I didn't know about that. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that Marvel was fucking up and then saying they were going to do something and they didn't do it and go back on their word. So, as for why their promises were never kept, he posted, I think particularly because they had chased away the talent or barred the talent from working that could have actually accomplished that, and that could have returned to them to greatness. They're rare exceptions. Dan Juggins continues to do terrific work at DC, but that's a rare exception. For the most part, all the contemporaries of Dan Juggins, they're not working in comics or they're doing their own thing. And it's kind of true, like, DC and Marvel, they don't seem to be hiring people with actual talent. They seem to be just hiring people who have the right politics, which is bullshit. Like, they hire people like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is a hack and a race hustler, basically. Like, he's a useless human being, and they gave him a job. And now they're having him work on a superhero movie. And not because of actual talent of writing, or that he gives a shit about comics. They gave it to him because he has the right skin pigmentation, or he just has the politics they like. That's it. So you have bullshit like that, or you have them alienating the actual talent and kicking them to the curb and forcing them to go to indies, which I'm fine with because I want the indie scene to expand more and more. And yeah, no, DC and Marvel, they did this to themselves. They deserve every bit of it. And I don't feel sorry for any of them. I'm glad Stan Lee's no longer there, so he doesn't have to suffer the repercussions for these dumbasses. And yeah, fuck them. They deserve everything they get. Continuing with the article, Dixon then turned his attention to Comicsgate. This is where Comicsgate comes in, because what happened was, because Marvel and DC chased away 60-70% of their readership, and no new readers came in to replace them, because why would they? Comics aren't that interesting. They're not that engaging. They're not that attractive. And they feature characters that, for the most part, people couldn't even recognize anymore because they've either been completely changed or altered in such a way that the general public no longer recognizes them. Yeah, like making certain characters gay, who were never gay before. So kids going to see Marvel or DC movies wanted a comic book like those characters. They couldn't even find anything like those characters. So Cells created, Kate cratered, continued to crater, death spiral, he noted. He didn't question, but what happened to all of those comic book readers? People like you, like people like me, we want to read comics. We don't want to stop just because they suck. So into the gap comes Comicsgate. I don't even like Comicsgate as a term because it started out as a pejorative. Oh, you're part of Comicsgate, like some sort of like it's some conspiracy, like we all live in the same house. He opined, and I don't even know what Comicsgate is. Then why are you opining on it? Anyway, I'm not even sure what Comicsgate means. I'm always included in Comicsgate when they make a list of Comicsgate people. I'm always on it, often near the top, which is why I jokingly say I'm the Jesus of Comicsgate. I was the first. I was blacklisted by industry and outed as a conservative, he stated succinctly. Dixon then does his best to define Comicsgate. I'm not even sure that what Comicsgate is. It's like a loose affiliation, and it's a very loose affiliation because a lot of Comicsgate people don't like each other. But what it is a bunch of successful pros and some amateurs who are now pro very much, who through crowdfunding or whatever other means created their own comics, did away with the gatekeepers, said, "Hey, we don't need the big two," and reached out to that underserved comic book audience that no longer reads DC or Marvel. And DC and Marvel, their editorship and their creator people deeply resent this, and so they make it into something political. It's not accident that the majority of Comicsgate people or the other majority of these independent creators tend to be conservative, because so many of them no longer work for the big two because they were blacklisted, says creator of Bane. The Arkhaven comics writer then stated, so what were they supposed to do? They supposed to go become creators at Walmart, or do they find a way to keep doing what they do best, which is create comics? And we know the names: Billy Tushy, Ethan Van Sciver, Graham Nolan, Richard Meyer. These guys have been incredibly successful. There's others as well. Brian Pulido. Brian Pulido is a rock star of crowdfunding, working outside the system. Of course, Brian Pulido has always worked outside the system. He always found a way. Dixon continued, so that's what Comicsgate is. And I find it funny that some of the big critics of Comicsgate tried to do what the quote-unquote Comicsgate people were doing, and they fell flat on their faces because they didn't seem to understand. They mistook it for a political movement. It's not really a movement. It's not like we all get along together in a castle somewhere and say, well, you are going to do this and I'm going to do this, and you're going to do, and you're going to do. This was an organic. This was people making their own efforts, figuring out how to do the comics they wanted to do, figuring out how to continue their careers, figuring out how to keep food on the table for their families, and also to serve their fans the people who had supported them all these years and didn't want them to go away, he detailed. Later, Dixon states, so like I said, Comicsgate was a pejorative, it's an insult, but some of the Comicsgate people embraced it like it's a badge of honor. I don't really see it that way. I just think it's a kind of dumb term. I don't think it accurately describes what's going on. I see it more as an independent creator revolution, a creator-owned revolution. After noting his own role in Comicsgate or the creator revolution with his contributions to Arkham comics and Arctoons, Dixon addressed the question about waking up Marvel and DC. He said, as far as waking up Marvel and DC, let them sleep. Let them stay asleep. And that's the end of the article. Yeah, I say let Marvel and DC stay asleep. They deserve to go bankrupt. Survival of the fittest. Adapt or die. Well, Marvel and DC, you have shown you do not want to adapt. You want to die. You can die. And we'll all celebrate. And I'll be sure to celebrate at your funeral. I mean, you had a good run. It's been, what, nearly 100 years? Well, not nearly, but for some of you, one of you was, I think, around longer than the other. But anyway, yeah, they deserve what they get. And Chuck Dixon, as always, nails the hammer on the head. And, yeah, he's just... Like, it really surprised me, because I remember the first time I read an article about that guy, he was bitching about the hero's journey. And I thought, this guy sounds like a douchebag. But yeah, no, he's been right on some things. And I can begrudge that to someone I disagree with. But, yeah, I think that's the video. So I'm not able to really think, I'm still just, like, recovering from the beer bug. But... yeah, as always, there will be a link in the description to the article if you want to read it for yourself, or if you had trouble understanding me, which I can see that being a thing. I'm a very hard person to understand with the way I talk. And, yeah, that's it. That's the video. Have a nice day, and remember the game was rigged from the start.